The courtroom was silent except for the sound of my lawyer shuffling papers. I sat there, 7 months pregnant, my hands resting on my swollen belly, watching my husband Marcus avoid my eyes. The divorce proceedings had been brutal. 3 months of accusations. Of him screaming that the baby wasn't his, of his family's lawyers trying to prove I was an unfaithful gold digger who trapped their precious son. But none of that prepared me for what happened next. The judge was about to rule on the paternity dispute when the courtroom doors opened. A woman walked in, elegant, composed, with 2 teenagers trailing behind her. I recognized her immediately from the photos Marcus kept hidden in his office drawer. Simone, his ex-wife. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I need to stop these proceedings. I have information that changes everything." Marcus went white. His lawyer stood up, objecting, but the judge raised his hand for silence. "Mrs. Caldwell has filed an emergency motion. I'm allowing it." Simone walked to the witness stand, was sworn in, and then looked directly at Marcus with a mixture of pity and something darker, vindication. Maybe, or justice delayed. "The children Marcus is raising, Jaden and Kayla, they aren't his biological children either. And I've known this for 14 years. The courtroom erupted. Marcus shot to his feet, his face twisted in disbelief and rage. I felt the baby kick hard against my ribs, as if even my unborn child could sense that our entire world was about to implode. "That's impossible," Marcus choked out. "You're lying. Why would you?" "Because," Simone cut him off, her voice like ice. "Your father paid me $500,000 to keep quiet. And now, watching him do the same thing to her," she gestured toward me, "I can't stay silent anymore. Let me tell you how I got here, how I married a man I thought I knew, only to discover that lies ran so deep in his family that even he didn't know the truth about his own life. My name is Nadia Reeves, and 6 years ago, I was a pediatric nurse working the night shift at Mercy General Hospital in Atlanta. I loved my job, the tiny patients, the grateful parents, the feeling that I was making a real difference in the world. I was 28, single, and perfectly content with my life. That's when I met Marcus Caldwell. He came into the pediatric wing at 2 a.m., frantic and disheveled. His daughter Kayla, she was 9 then, had fallen off her bike and needed stitches. He was a mess, clearly out of his depth, and I calmed him down while the doctors worked on Kayla. We talked for hours that night. He told me about his divorce from Simone 2 years earlier, about how he was trying to be a good father to his kids, despite the custody arrangement. He seemed genuine, vulnerable, real. "You're good at this," he said, as we watched Kayla sleep peacefully after her procedure, "being calm when everything feels chaotic." "It's my job," I smiled. "No," he shook his head. "It's more than that. You actually care." We started dating 3 weeks later. Marcus was everything I thought I wanted: successful as a commercial real estate developer, devoted to his children, charming in that effortless way that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. His family was wealthy, old Atlanta money, and while I came from a working-class background, Marcus never made me feel less than. His father, Richard Caldwell, was different. He owned half the commercial properties in the metropolitan area, served on boards, knew governors and senators by their first names. He looked at me like I was a stain on his expensive furniture. "Another nurse," he said the first time we met, his voice dripping with disdain. "Marcus does have a type." Before I continue, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love hearing from you. And if this story resonates with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Simone, Marcus's ex-wife, was also a nurse when they met. That's what Richard meant. Marcus had a pattern, but I didn't see it as an insult then. I saw it as proof that Marcus valued substance over status. Don't mind my father, Marcus said later. He's never approved of anyone I've dated. He wanted me to marry into another wealthy family, keep the bloodline pure, or whatever old money nonsense he believes in. I met Simone only twice during those early dating months. She was cordial but distant, focused on smooth co-parenting for the kids' sake. She was beautiful, tall, dark-skinned, with an elegance that seemed effortless. I felt intimidated by her at first, worried I'd never measure up. She's not part of my life anymore, Marcus assured me. We're better as friends than we ever were as spouses. I met Jaden and Kayla 6 months into our relationship. Jaden was 12, quiet and thoughtful, always with a book. Kayla was 10, bubbly and energetic, always moving. They looked nothing like Marcus. Jaden had lighter skin and hazel eyes. Kayla had fine features and a delicate build, but I'd seen enough families to know genetics were unpredictable. Do they look like their mom? I asked Marcus once, studying a family photo. Jaden does, he said. Kayla looks like Simone's grandmother, apparently. I never met the woman. Red flag number 1. I dismissed it. Marcus proposed after a year. It was perfect, a private dinner at the restaurant where we'd had our first date. A vintage ring that had belonged to his grandmother. Tears and laughter and promises of forever. We married 6 months later. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Simone wasn't there. She sent her congratulations through Marcus, but the kids were. They stood beside us. Jaden as Marcus's best man, Kayla as my flower girl. Richard barely spoke to me at the reception. His wife, Victoria, was warmer but stilted, as if she'd been coached on how to interact with the help. "Welcome to the family," she said, kissing both my cheeks, but her eyes were sad, almost pitying. Red flag number 2. The first year of marriage was blissful. We bought a beautiful house in Buckhead. I transferred to day shifts so I could be home when the kids visited on weekends. And Marcus and I talked about having a baby of our own. I loved being a stepmother. Jaden and Kayla were wonderful kids, and while they clearly loved their mother more, they accepted me with grace. Then I got pregnant. Marcus was ecstatic. He spun me around the kitchen, called his parents, told the kids immediately. "You're going to have a baby brother or sister," he announced. And Kayla squealed with excitement. But something changed in him around month 4. He became distant, questioned where I'd been, started checking my phone, asked strange questions about my schedule, my co-workers, whether I'd been faithful. "Marcus, what's wrong?" I asked, after he interrogated me about a male colleague who'd walked me to my car. "Nothing," he said, but his jaw was tight. "I just want to make sure everything's right." "Right? I'm pregnant with your child. What could be more right?" He didn't answer. Red flag number 3. By month 6, the accusations started. Subtle at first. Comments about how the baby better look like him. Jokes about paternity tests that didn't feel like jokes. His family was worse. Richard pulled me aside at a dinner party. "I hope you know what you're doing," he said, his voice low and threatening. "This family has a reputation. If there's any question about this child's paternity, I'll make sure you never see a dime." "There's no question," I said, trembling with anger and confusion. "I've never been unfaithful to Marcus. Ever." "That's what they all say," Victoria added, appearing behind her husband like a ghost. "Until the truth comes out." I told Marcus about the conversation. He brushed it off. "They're just protective. Ignore them." But he didn't defend me. He didn't tell them to back off. He just let them continue. By month 7, I'd had enough. Marcus came home drunk one night and started screaming. "I know what you did," he slurred. "I know this baby isn't mine." "What are you talking about?" I was shaking, one hand on my belly protectively. "You think I'm stupid? You think I don't see how you look at other men? How you're always on your phone?" I'm on my phone texting you most of the time. Prove it, he snarled. Take a paternity test. Right now. Prove that baby is mine. That's when I knew something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. This wasn't normal jealousy or pregnancy anxiety. This was something else. Something darker. Fine, I said, my voice cold. We'll take the test. And when it proves you're the father, I want you to get therapy for whatever paranoid delusion is eating you alive. He filed for divorce 2 days later. The divorce papers cited irreconcilable differences, but Marcus's lawyer made his real claim clear. He believed I'd committed adultery, that the baby wasn't his, and that he wanted a paternity test mandated by the court before he'd pay a single dollar in child support. I was devastated, not just by the divorce. I could see that coming, but by the cruelty of it. The man who'd promised to love me forever was publicly calling me a cheater, questioning my integrity, trying to humiliate me into submission. My lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Teresa Blackwood, was furious. This is unconscionable, she said, reading through Marcus's filing. He has no evidence of infidelity, no witnesses, no proof, just baseless accusations designed to hurt you and avoid financial responsibility. So, what do? We agree to the paternity test. We prove he's the father. Then we take him for everything he's worth. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was happening. Marcus's behavior was too extreme, too specific. The way he looked at my belly with disgust, the way his entire family had turned against me with perfectly coordinated cruelty. One night, I called Simone. We'd never been close, why would we be? I was the new wife, but desperation makes you reach for unlikely allies. I found her number in an old contact list Marcus had left behind. Simone? It's Nadia. Marcus's wife. Ex-wife. I guess. There was a long pause. I know who you are. What do you want? I need to ask you something. Did Marcus ever accuse you of cheating when you were pregnant? The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Yes, she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. Both times. My heart stopped. Both times? With Jaden and Kayla. He demanded paternity tests for both of them. Said I'd been unfaithful, that he couldn't trust me, that his father had seen me with other men. And the tests? Came back positive. He was their father. Or so. The tests said. What do you mean? So the tests said. Another long pause. Nadia, I can't talk about this on the phone. Can we meet? We met at a coffee shop in Virginia Highland, far from Marcus's usual haunts. Simone looked older than in her photos, lines of stress etched around her eyes. She ordered nothing, just sat across from me with her hands folded. I'm only telling you this because I can't watch him do it to another woman, she began. But you have to promise me you won't reveal where you got this information. Not yet. I promise. Richard Caldwell, Marcus's father, he's not a good man. He's controlling, manipulative, and obsessed with the family legacy. When I got pregnant with Jaden, Marcus was thrilled. But Richard started planting seeds of doubt. Are you sure he's yours? She was awfully close to her male nursing partner. I saw them having coffee together. That's insane. That's Richard. He did it with Kayla too. By then, I was so beaten down, I just agreed to the tests to shut them up. Both came back positive. Marcus was the father, but something always felt wrong. What do you mean? Simone leaned forward. The tests were done at Caldwell Medical Center, Richard's facility, his doctors, his labs. My stomach dropped. You think he manipulated the results? I didn't then. I was too tired, too worn down by the constant accusations. But after the divorce, I started thinking, why would Richard work so hard to prove paternity if Marcus was actually the father? Why the elaborate charade? Unless Marcus wasn't the father. Exactly. But then who? Simone's face went hard. I don't know. And that's what terrifies me, because if those children aren't Marcus's, and I sure as hell know I was faithful, then someone did something to me. And Richard covered it up. I felt sick. The room spun. Simone, are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I have memory gaps from both pregnancies. Nights where I felt strange, disconnected. Times when I'd wake up and not remember how I got to bed. I thought it was just pregnancy exhaustion, but now, we need to retest the kids, I said urgently. We need to know the truth. I can't. Richard paid me $500,000 as part of the divorce settlement to sign an NDA. If I violate it, I lose everything: my home, my car, the kids' college funds. He owns me. But if we prove he falsified medical records, that NDA is void. Simone shook her head. You don't understand. Richard Caldwell isn't just rich. He's connected. Judges, politicians, police chiefs, they all owe him favors. If I come forward without ironclad proof, he'll destroy me. He'll take my kids. He'll ruin my career. He's done it before. To who? I don't know, but I've heard whispers. Other women, other children, a whole network of secrets that Richard maintains to protect the Caldwell name. I left that meeting in a daze. My pregnancy felt like a ticking time bomb. If what Simone suggested was true, if Richard had some dark pattern of manipulating paternity, of covering up crimes, then my baby was at risk. I was at risk. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I broke into Marcus's home office while he was at work. I'd kept my key when I moved out, and he hadn't changed the locks yet. I slipped inside, my pregnant belly barely fitting between the desk and filing cabinet, and started searching. Medical records, financial statements, legal documents. I copied everything I could onto a thumb drive, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type. And then I found it. Hidden in a locked drawer, I jimmied open with a letter opener. A file labeled Simone, confidential. Inside were medical reports, 2 paternity tests for Jaden and Kayla. Both showed Marcus as the father, but there were handwritten notes in the margins. Richard's distinctive script. Results adjusted per protocol. Subject unaware. Sample replacement complete. Sample replacement. The tests were faked, which meant Jaden and Kayla weren't Marcus's biological children, which meant someone had done something to Simone, and Richard had covered it up. I photographed everything with my phone, put the files back, and left. When I got home, I called Teresa Blackwood. We need to talk, I said. I just found evidence of a crime. Teresa Blackwood didn't believe me at first. I couldn't blame her, the story sounded insane. Falsified paternity tests? A wealthy patriarch covering up assault? An elaborate conspiracy spanning 14 years? But when I showed her the photographs, her expression changed from skepticism to cold fury. This is evidence of medical fraud at minimum, she said, spreading the images across her desk. If what you're suggesting is true, that Richard Caldwell manipulated paternity tests to cover up sexual assault, we're talking about multiple felonies, criminal conspiracy, RICO statutes. This is huge. Can we use it in the divorce? We can use it to blow up his entire family, Teresa said grimly. But we need more. One file with handwritten notes isn't enough. We need corroborating evidence, witnesses, paper trails, and most importantly, we need to know the truth about Jaden and Kayla's actual paternity. How do we get that without tipping off Richard? We don't. We make him think we're focused on your case while we build the bigger investigation behind the scenes. I have a friend at the FBI, White-Collar Crimes Division. This kind of medical fraud falls under their jurisdiction, especially if Caldwell Medical Center processes Medicare and Medicaid claims. Federal funding means federal oversight. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Simone's face when she talked about those memory gaps. I thought about myself. Had there been nights when I felt strange, times when I couldn't remember details? And then I remembered. 3 months before I got pregnant, Marcus and I had gone to a family dinner at Richard and Victoria's estate. I'd had 2 glasses of wine. I remember that clearly, because Victoria commented that I was finally relaxing around the family. But after dinner, everything went hazy. I remembered feeling dizzy, Marcus helping me to a guest room to lie down. Then nothing until the next morning, when I woke up fully clothed on top of the covers, Marcus asleep in a chair beside the bed. "What happened?" I'd asked. "You passed out. Too much wine, I guess. Dad said to let you sleep it off." I'd felt embarrassed, apologized profusely. But I'd only had 2 glasses. I was a nurse, I knew my limits. 2 glasses of wine shouldn't have knocked me unconscious for 8 hours. Unless there was something else in those glasses. I ran to the bathroom and vomited, my pregnant belly pressing against the toilet bowl. Oh God. Oh God, oh God, oh God. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Nadia Caldwell." A woman's voice. Young and frightened. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Dr. Keisha Patterson. I'm a resident at Caldwell Medical Center. I need to talk to you about something I found." "What did you find?" "Not over the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow? Somewhere public?" We met at Piedmont Park, sitting on a bench far from other people. Dr. Patterson was in her late 20s, dark circles under her eyes, her hands trembling as she clutched a folder. "I could lose my medical license for this," she said, "but I can't stay quiet anymore." "What is it?" "I've been reviewing old records. I'm doing research on genetic testing accuracy for my thesis. I found anomalies in the paternity tests processed through Caldwell Medical's lab. Lots of them, all involving the Caldwell family or close associates." She opened the folder. Inside were dozens of test results, highlighted sections showing inconsistencies. "Look at this one. The genetic markers don't match the stated paternity, but the conclusion says positive match. And this one, the sample collection dates, don't align with the pregnancy timeline. And this one shows signs of sample contamination, but it was still processed as valid." "How many?" "At least 40 cases over the past 20 years, all covering up false paternities or confirming false paternities. It's systematic, deliberate. Who ordered them?" She pointed to a signature at the bottom of each form. "Richard Caldwell, medical director. He's been doing this for 2 decades, I whispered. "How many women? How many children?" "I don't know. But I found something else." She pulled out another document. Insurance claims for genetic counseling sessions, all billed to Richard Caldwell's private account. All for women who later showed up in these falsified paternity records. Genetic counseling for what? That's what I couldn't figure out. So I cross-referenced the women's names with other medical records, and I found a pattern. She took a deep breath. Every single one of these women had been treated at Caldwell Medical's fertility clinic. My blood ran cold. Fertility clinic? For artificial insemination. IVF. Egg harvesting. Richard Caldwell ran the clinic personally for 15 years before handing it off to a protege. You're saying he? I'm saying I think he was using his own genetic material instead of the approved donor samples, and then covering it up with falsified paternity tests so the husbands would think the children were theirs. The world tilted. I gripped the bench to keep from falling. "Simone was treated at that fertility clinic," I said numbly. "She had trouble conceiving naturally. Marcus mentioned it once, said his father helped them with fertility treatments. Then there's a high probability that Jaden and Kayla are Richard Caldwell's biological children, not Marcus's. And Marcus never knew. No one knew except Richard. He made sure of it. I thought about those children, Jaden, so quiet and studious. Kayla, so full of light. They thought Marcus was their father. Simone thought fertility treatments had simply worked, but the whole time, Richard had been playing God, creating children who carried his DNA, while hiding behind falsified tests and sealed records. Why would he do this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Control, Dr. Patterson said. Legacy. Some twisted belief that his bloodline is superior. I've seen his personal journals. He kept detailed notes about genetic traits, family histories, which women would produce optimal offspring. It's eugenics dressed up as family planning. We need to go to the police. I've tried. Do you know who sits on the hospital board with Richard? The police chief, the district attorney, a federal judge. They've all invested in Caldwell Medical. They all have reasons to protect him. Then we go to the media and get dismissed as conspiracy theorists? We need irrefutable proof. DNA tests from an independent lab, testimony from the women, documentation that can't be explained away. I know how to get it, I said, my hand on my pregnant belly. We use me as bait. My plan was simple but dangerous. I would agree to a paternity test for my baby, but this time, we'd use a completely independent lab, nowhere connected to the Caldwell family. Teresa would handle the legal side, ensuring the chain of custody was ironclad. But we needed more than just my case. We needed to test Jaden and Kayla to prove Richard's long-term pattern. And for that, we needed Simone's cooperation. I called her, explained what Dr. Patterson had found. At first, she didn't believe it. Fertility treatments, she said, her voice rising with panic. No, that can't be right. I would remember. Simone, think. Did Richard ever give you supplements? Vitamins? Anything during the fertility process? A long silence. He said they were hormones to boost egg production. I took them for 6 months before I got pregnant with Jaden. Did Marcus take anything? No. Richard said Marcus's sperm count was fine, that the issue was with my eggs. It wasn't. He lied. He needed you to believe there was a problem, so you'd accept his help. I heard her crying on the other end of the line. My children, my babies, they're not Marcus's. Genetically, no, but they're yours. And Marcus raised them. DNA doesn't erase that. But, Richard, how could he? We need to prove it, Simone. We need DNA tests for Jaden and Kayla. Independent tests. Will you help us? She agreed, though it took 3 days of conversations, and Teresa's assurance that we could break the NDA on grounds of fraud. Getting the kids' DNA was easier than expected. Jaden had a wisdom tooth pulled, and Simone saved it. Kayla's school required a physical exam. Simone requested copies of the blood work for her records. We sent everything to a lab in California Gentech Laboratories, one of the most respected in the country, completely independent from any Caldwell influence. While we waited for results, I continued to play the role of defeated ex-wife. I showed up to divorce mediations, agreed to Marcus's demands for a paternity test through his preferred lab, which we knew would be manipulated, and acted like I'd accepted my fate. Marcus was triumphant. See? I told you she'd cave, I heard him tell his lawyer. But behind the scenes, we were building an army. Dr. Patterson connected us with other medical staff who'd witnessed irregularities. A lab technician who'd been fired for questioning Richard's direct orders. A nurse who'd seen Richard personally handle samples that should have been processed by standard protocol. Teresa brought in her FBI contact agent Marcus Shaw, no relation to my husband. He was a bulldog of an investigator. 50s, seen everything, believed nothing, until proven. Medical fraud cases are tough, he said when we met. Juries don't understand genetic testing. Defense lawyers make it seem like honest mistakes. But if you've got a pattern 40 cases, systematic falsification, financial motive, that's something we can work with. What about the assault? I asked. If Richard was drugging these women, using his own sperm without consent. That's rape, Agent Shaw said bluntly. But proving it after years have passed, with no physical evidence, no witnesses, that's almost impossible. Our best shot is the fraud angle. Build that case, get him in custody, then the other charges can follow. The DNA results came back 3 weeks later. Jaden, not Marcus's biological son. Match with Richard Caldwell, probability 99.9%. Kayla, not Marcus's biological daughter. Match with Richard Caldwell, probability 99.9%. I showed the results to Simone in Teresa's office. She stared at the papers, hands shaking, tears streaming down her face. He's their grandfather, she whispered. Except, he's not. He's their father. My children are his children. And Marcus, oh God, Marcus raised them, thinking they were his. We need to tell him, I said gently. How? How do I tell him that his entire life is a lie? That his father is a monster? That his children aren't his children? We tell him together, Teresa said. But not yet. First, we lock down the legal case. Because once Richard finds out we know, he'll come at us with everything he's got. She was right. 2 days later, someone broke into my apartment. Nothing was taken, but everything was searched. Drawers opened, files disturbed. My computer turned on. They were looking for evidence, looking for what we'd found. I called Teresa in a panic. She called Agent Shaw. He installed security cameras, changed my locks, moved me to a safe house. They know, he said grimly. Someone tipped them off. Who? Could be anyone. Law firm staff, medical center employee, someone who saw us meeting. But now they're in defensive mode, which means they'll get sloppy. He was right. Richard made his first mistake by calling Marcus into his office for an emergency family meeting. Marcus called me afterward, his voice strange. My father wants to meet with you. Privately. He says he has an offer. What kind of offer? He wouldn't say. But Nadia. He sounded scared. I've never heard him sound scared before. If this story is making your blood boil like mine was, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, the revenge gets so much better. Your support means everything to this channel. I agreed to meet Richard, but only with Teresa present and wearing a wire. Agent Shaw would be listening from a vehicle outside. We met at the Caldwell estate. Richard looked older than I remembered, grayer, thinner, his usual arrogance replaced by something more calculating. Thank you for coming, he said, gesturing to a chair in his home office. Teresa sat beside me, silent and watchful. What's this about? I asked. Richard poured himself a drink. I understand you've been conducting an investigation, looking into old medical records, asking questions about paternity tests. My heart raced. I'm preparing for my divorce. Due diligence. Don't insult my intelligence, Nadia. I know you've been talking to Simone. I know you found the files in Marcus's office. And I know you're working with that little crusader at the hospital, Dr. Patterson. Is it? Teresa stiffened beside me. Are you threatening my client? Not threatening. Negotiating. He opened a folder and slid it across the desk. This is a settlement offer. $5 million. Full custody of your child. Marcus will terminate his parental rights. You'll sign an NDA that covers everything you found. You'll move out of state. You'll never contact this family again. And if I refuse, Richard's smile was cold. Then I'll destroy you. I'll prove you've been unfaithful. I have private investigators who can manufacture evidence. I'll take that child. I'll have you declared an unfit mother. I'll sue you for defamation, drain you with legal fees, ruin your nursing career. By the time I'm done, you'll be penniless, childless, and broken. You think you're that powerful? I don't think. I know. I looked at Teresa. She nodded slightly. Time to play our hand. Here's my counteroffer, I said, pulling out a folder of my own. You turn yourself in to the FBI for medical fraud, conspiracy, and sexual assault. You provide full documentation of every falsified paternity test. You dissolve the Caldwell Medical Center and place all assets in a victim compensation fund. And you tell Marcus the truth about Jaden and Kayla. Richard's face went purple. You have no idea what you're doing. Actually, I do. Because unlike you, I have real evidence. Genetic tests from an independent lab. Testimony from 40 women you victimized. Financial records showing systematic fraud. Witnesses who've seen you manipulate samples. And federal investigators who are very, very interested in your Medicare fraud. Those tests are inadmissible. I have lawyers. We also have this conversation recorded, Teresa said calmly. Every threat you just made, every admission of guilt, all captured by the wire my client is wearing. And it's already been transmitted to federal agents. Richard's hand shook. His drink spilled across his desk. You're bluffing. Call the FBI field office, I said, standing up. Agent Marcus Shaw. He's been investigating you for 3 weeks. He has warrants ready to execute. The only question is whether you go quietly, or whether we make this as public and humiliating as possible. Marcus will never believe you. He's my son. No, I said quietly. He's the man you lied to for 38 years. He's the father who raised children you stole from him. And when he finds out the truth, he won't be your son anymore. He'll be your enemy. We left Richard sitting in his office, staring at the walls like a man watching his empire crumble. Marcus called that night. What did you do? What I had to. My father just told me. His voice cracked. He said things. Impossible things. About Jaden and Kayla. About paternity tests. About you having evidence of crimes. Marcus, we need to talk. In person. Bring your lawyer if you want. But you need to hear this from me. We met at a neutral location. A conference room Teresa rented at a hotel. Marcus brought his attorney. I brought Teresa, Dr. Patterson, and the DNA results. I laid everything out. The falsified paternity tests. Richard's fertility clinic fraud. The genetic matches proving Jaden and Kayla were Richard's biological children, not Marcus's. Marcus didn't speak. He just stared at the documents, his face cycling through disbelief, rage, devastation, denial. This isn't possible, he finally said. I'm their father. I've been their father for 14 years. You are their father, I said gently. Biology doesn't change that. You raised them. You love them. You're the only father they've ever known. But my father, with Simone, we don't know the exact circumstances. But based on the pattern with other women, it's likely she was drugged, given something during the fertility treatments that made her compliant or unconscious. Then your father used his own genetic material instead of yours. Marcus stood up so fast, his chair toppled backward. I'm going to kill him. No, Teresa said firmly. You're going to let the FBI arrest him. You're going to testify against him. And you're going to help us make sure he never hurts another woman again. Does Simone know? Yes. Do the kids know? Not yet. We wanted to tell you first. Marcus looked at me with something like horror. And you? My father, did he do the same thing to you? I don't know. Maybe. There was a night at his house when I blacked out. 3 months before I got pregnant. Jesus Christ. Marcus sat down heavily. My whole life is a lie. My children aren't mine. My father is a monster. My wife, my ex-wife, might have been assaulted while I slept in a chair next to her. Marcus. I reached across the table. Your life isn't a lie. Those kids are yours in every way that matters. And we need you to be strong for them. Because when this goes public, they're going to need their father. He looked at me. Why are you being kind to me? I accused you of cheating. I filed for divorce. I said horrible things. Because your father programmed you to do that. He planted those doubts in your head just like he did with Simone. He wanted you to suspect us, to demand paternity tests he could control, to never question his narrative. You were a victim too, Marcus. We all were, he cried then, deep, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. His lawyer looked away, uncomfortable. Teresa passed him tissues. When he finally composed himself, he asked the question I'd been dreading. What happens now? Now, Agent Shaw said, entering the room with perfect timing. We arrest Richard Caldwell. The FBI doesn't move fast, but when they move with devastating precision. Agent Shaw explained the plan. Simultaneous warrants executed at Richard's home, office, and the medical center. Seizure of all records, computers, and financial documents. Interviews with every employee who'd worked at the fertility clinic. But more importantly, they needed witnesses willing to testify. That meant convincing the other women those 40 cases of falsified paternity to come forward. Teresa and I became a 2-woman task force. We tracked down every name from Dr. Patterson's list. Some women had moved away. Others had died. Many wanted nothing to do with reopening old wounds. But 10 agreed to meet us. We gathered them in Teresa's conference room on a Saturday morning. These women were from different backgrounds, wealthy wives, working-class mothers, professionals, students who'd gotten pregnant young, but they all shared one thing. They'd all been patients at Richard Caldwell's fertility clinic. I always wondered why my daughter looked nothing like my husband, one woman said. She was in her 50s now, her daughter grown. He had dark hair and brown eyes. She was blonde and blue-eyed. But the paternity test said he was the father, so we accepted it. Mine too, another said. Except, I knew I'd never been unfaithful. I knew something was wrong, but everyone told me I was paranoid, that genetics were just random. He took away my choice, a third woman whispered. I wanted my husband's child. I consented to fertility treatments using my husband's sperm. But Richard gave me someone else's, his without telling me. That's rape. That's genetic rape. One by one, they shared their stories. The memory gaps, the strange symptoms after appointments, the way Richard had been overly involved in their care, insisting on handling their cases personally. And then we showed them the DNA results. Every single child from those pregnancies matched Richard Caldwell's genetic profile. The room fell silent. Some women cried, others raged. One fainted and had to be revived with water and air. He did this to all of us, someone said. For years, for decades, and no one stopped him. We're stopping him now, Teresa said. But we need you to testify. We need you to go on record. I won't lie, it will be painful. His lawyers will attack your credibility, question your motives, drag up every mistake you've ever made. But if we stand together, we can put him away forever. 8 women agreed to testify. 2 couldn't, one was too ill. Another was terrified of her abusive husband finding out. But 8 was enough. Agent Shaw moved forward with the warrants. I found out later from Marcus, who was there, what happened when the FBI came for his father. Richard was in his office at the medical center, completely unaware. He'd convinced himself that his money and connections would protect him, that the investigation would fizzle out like others had before. He was wrong. Agents in windbreakers and bulletproof vests swarmed the building. They escorted staff out, sealed doors, started pulling files. Richard tried to call his lawyers, his political allies, anyone who could stop this. No one answered. They arrested him at his desk, read him his rights in front of his employees, walked him out in handcuffs while news cameras captured every second. Victoria, his wife, collapsed when they came to the estate with search warrants. She'd known, Marcus realized later. Maybe not the full extent, but she'd known something. The way she'd looked at Simone, the pity in her eyes when she'd welcomed me to the family. She'd known her husband was a monster and said nothing. They found evidence everywhere. Richard hadn't been as careful as he'd thought. He'd kept journals documenting his genetic enhancement program. Files on each woman, their medical histories, their husband's genetic backgrounds, his own assessments of which traits would produce superior offspring. It was eugenics. It was a decades-long crime spree. It was evil. And it was all about to become public knowledge. The story broke 3 days later. Front page of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Prominent doctor arrested in decades-long fertility fraud scheme. But that was just the beginning. National news picked it up within hours. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. Every major outlet was covering it. Richard Caldwell, philanthropist and medical pioneer, had systematically impregnated his patients with his own sperm, falsified paternity tests, and built an empire on lies. The medical center was shut down pending investigation. Richard's colleagues were questioned. 3 other doctors were arrested as accomplices. And the children, oh God, the children. There were at least 50 that they'd confirmed. 50 children who'd grown up thinking their fathers were their fathers, only to discover they were actually the children of a man who'd violated their mothers. Jaden and Kayla were among them. Simone and Marcus decided to tell them together. I wasn't there, it wasn't my place, but Marcus called me afterward, his voice broken. Jaden didn't say anything. He just went to his room and locked the door. Kayla cried for 2 hours. She kept asking if Marcus was still her father, if he still loved her. What did you tell her? I told her that I've been her father since the day she was born, and nothing changes that. That DNA is just science, but love is what makes a family. That's the right answer. She asked if she has to call Richard grandfather or father now. I told her she never has to call him anything, that he's a criminal who hurt her mother and stole something from our family, and she owes him nothing. The divorce proceedings became irrelevant. Marcus withdrew his paternity challenge, filed paperwork to establish himself as my baby's legal father, regardless of genetics, and asked me if we could try to work things out. I don't know, I told him honestly. You hurt me, Marcus. You believed the worst about me without evidence. You threw me away when I needed you most. I know. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. But Nadia, please, let me try. We'll see, I said. First, let's get through this trial. The trial was scheduled for 6 months later. The prosecution had an overwhelming case, physical evidence, witness testimony, financial records, Richard's own journals. But his lawyers were expensive and creative. They argued it wasn't rape because the women had consented to fertility treatments. They argued the falsified paternity tests were clerical errors. They tried to paint Richard as a visionary who was helping infertile couples have children. The jury didn't buy it. But the most devastating moment came when Simone testified. She took the stand wearing a simple black dress, her hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked directly at Richard, who sat at the defense table with the blank expression of a man who felt no remorse, and told her story. I trusted him. He was my father-in-law. He was a respected doctor. When he said I needed special treatments to get pregnant, I believed him. When he gave me supplements and hormones, I took them. When he said my husband's genetic material had been successfully used, I believed him. And when did you discover the truth? The prosecutor asked. 14 years later, when another woman he'd victimized gave me the courage to ask questions. She looked at me in the gallery. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. How did it feel when you learned your children were conceived through deception? Like I'd been violated in the most fundamental way. He took away my choice, my husband's legacy, my children's right to know their true genetic history. He played God with our lives because he believed his DNA was superior. And he made us all accomplices in his crime by lying to us. The defense tried to discredit her. They brought up the money she'd received in the divorce settlement, suggested she'd known all along, implied she was testifying for revenge. But then, The prosecutor played a recording. It was from one of Richard's own sessions with a psychologist. Doctor-patient privilege didn't apply since he'd recorded the sessions himself. In it, Richard bragged about his genetic legacy, about how many children carried his DNA without their mother's knowledge, about how he'd created the perfect family line through manipulation and fraud. "I'm building a dynasty," his voice echoed through the courtroom. "These women are just vessels. Their husbands are genetic dead ends. I'm improving the species, one child at a time." The gallery erupted. The judge called for order. Richard's lawyers tried to have the recording excluded, but it was too late. The jury had heard a monster speak in his own words. Other women testified. Some broke down on the stand. Others spoke with cold fury. Each story was the same: trust betrayed, choices stolen, lives manipulated. Dr. Patterson testified about the falsified records. Agent Shaw walked the jury through the financial fraud. Richard had been billing insurance companies for procedures he'd never performed, pocketing millions while committing crimes. And then I testified. "Teresa had prepared me, but nothing could prepare you for facing your abuser's family in a courtroom." Victoria sat in the front row, stone-faced. Marcus sat beside her, his head in his hands. Other Caldwell family members whispered and glared. I told my story. The memory gaps, the pregnancy, Marcus's paranoia, which I now understood was programmed by Richard, the threats, the intimidation, the $5 million bribe. "And are you certain that Richard Caldwell is the biological father of your child?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes. Independent DNA testing confirmed it, with 99.9% probability." "Did you consent to Richard Caldwell being the father of your child?" "Absolutely not. I was married to his son. I wanted my husband's child. If Richard did to me what he did to the other women, and based on that night I can't remember, I believe he did then what he did was rape." The defense attorney objected. The judge sustained it, but the jury had heard the word. Marcus testified last. He described growing up with Richard as a father: the constant criticism, the impossibly high standards, the way Richard had controlled every aspect of their family. He talked about the doubts planted in his head about Simone, about me, about every woman in his life. "My father made me believe I couldn't trust anyone," Marcus said, his voice breaking. He said women were manipulative, that paternity tests were the only way to be sure, that I had to protect the family legacy. I see now that he was projecting. He was the manipulator. He was the one destroying our family. And I let him do it, because I was too afraid to question him. The verdict came after 3 days of deliberation. Guilty on all counts: medical fraud, insurance fraud, rape by deception, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. 50 counts total. The judge sentenced Richard Caldwell to 40 years in prison without possibility of parole. At 70 years old, it was effectively a life sentence. "You violated the trust of your patients, your family, and your profession," the judge said. "You played God with people's lives for your own twisted sense of superiority. The harm you've caused is immeasurable and permanent. This court shows you the same mercy you showed your victims none." Richard showed no emotion as they led him away, but Victoria sobbed in the gallery, finally breaking her composure. After the trial, everything happened fast. Caldwell Medical Center was permanently closed. The building was sold, and the proceeds went into a victim compensation fund. Victoria divorced Richard and changed her name. She moved to Europe, unable to face the shame. The medical board revoked Richard's license. His name was stripped from buildings and scholarships. His philanthropy was revealed as blood money, an attempt to buy respectability while committing horrific crimes. But the real fallout was in the families. 50 children had to reckon with the truth about their parentage. Some families stayed together, others fractured. Adult children cut off contact with the parents who'd raised them, unable to process the betrayal. Support groups formed. Therapists specializing in genetic trauma made careers out of helping these families heal. Jaden and Kayla stayed with Marcus and Simone. It took time, years of therapy, tears, and difficult conversations, but they worked through it. Marcus remained their father, Simone remained their mother, and Richard became nothing but a cautionary tale. Marcus and I tried to reconcile. We went to couples therapy, talked about trust and trauma, and whether love could survive what we'd been through. "I want to try," he said. "For you, for our baby, for Jaden and Kayla. They need to see that families can heal." "I need time," I said. "I need to know you'll believe me, defend me, stand with me, not fall apart when things get hard. I promise I will. I promise I'll be better." It wasn't perfect. Some days I looked at him and saw his father. Other days, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with. But we kept trying. Our baby was born 6 weeks after the trial ended. Marcus was there. So was Simone. So were Jaden and Kayla. When the doctor placed my daughter in my arms, I looked at her tiny face and felt something break open inside me, not pain, but relief. She was here. She was healthy. She was ours. "What's her name?" the nurse asked. Marcus and I had discussed it. We'd agreed on something meaningful. "Destiny Truth Caldwell," I said. "Because her destiny is to live in truth, not the lies that nearly destroyed us." Marcus kissed my forehead. Perfect. The DNA test came back 2 weeks later. Marcus was not her biological father. Richard was. We already knew, but seeing it in black and white was still painful. "It doesn't matter," Marcus said, holding Destiny while I recovered. "She's mine. I don't care what the test says. I'm her father." And he was. The civil suits took another year. Every woman victimized by Richard filed claims against his estate. The courts ordered that all his assets, the mansions, the investment accounts, the commercial real estate, be liquidated and distributed to the victims and their children. I received $3.8 million as part of the settlement. So did Simone. So did every other woman. It wasn't about the money. It was about acknowledgement, about justice, about making sure that Monster couldn't hurt anyone else from prison. The Caldwell name became synonymous with scandal. Marcus legally changed his last name and the kids' names to his mother's maiden name, Richardson. He wanted nothing to do with his father's legacy. He sold his business, paid off debts, and started over in a new field, victim advocacy. He used his experience to help other families dealing with genetic fraud. "I can't undo what my father did," he told me, "but I can try to help the people he hurt. It's the least I can do." Simone went back to school, became a therapist specializing in reproductive trauma. She wrote a book about her experience, Stolen Motherhood: How One Man's God Complex Destroyed 100 Lives. It became a bestseller. Dr. Patterson kept her medical license and became a fierce advocate for patient rights and medical ethics reform. She testified before Congress on the need for independent oversight of fertility clinics. Laws changed. Regulations tightened. Richard's crimes became a case study in medical schools on what happens when power goes unchecked. As for me, I took my settlement money and started a foundation, Destiny's Children, to support kids who'd learned about genetic betrayal. We offered therapy, legal help, genetic counseling, and community support. Because there were more victims than we'd realized. Richard wasn't the only doctor doing this. As our case made headlines, other women came forward about other fertility doctors, other schemes, other monsters hiding behind white coats. The movement grew. Laws were passed. Men went to prison. And slowly, justice spread. 5 years after the trial, my life looked nothing like I'd imagined. Marcus and I were married again, a small ceremony, just family and close friends. Jaden and Kayla walked me down the aisle. Destiny was the flower girl. We moved out of Atlanta, away from the memories and the media attention. We bought a house in Savannah with a big backyard and a porch swing. Simone lived 2 streets away. We'd become genuine friends, bonded by trauma but choosing to build something better. Our kids went to the same school. We had family dinners together. We celebrated holidays together. This is weird, right? Simone said one Thanksgiving, watching our kids play in the yard. 5 years ago, we were strangers. Now we're raising children who share DNA, but not how we intended. It's weird, I agreed. But it's also beautiful. We chose this. Not what happened to us, but how we responded. That's power. Destiny was thriving. She was smart, funny, with Marcus's kindness and my stubbornness. She knew her story. We'd never lied to her, but it didn't define her. I'm special, she told her kindergarten class during show and tell. My mommy and daddy chose to be my mommy and daddy. Even though someone tried to hurt us, they chose love. The teacher called me crying. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Jaden was in college studying genetics. He wanted to understand the science behind what had happened, to maybe find a cure for the trauma genetic betrayal causes. Kayla was in high school, captain of the debate team, already planning her law career. I'm going to be a prosecutor, she announced. Like the lady who put grandfather in prison. I want to put bad people away. We didn't correct her when she called Richard grandfather. It was her way of creating distance from him while acknowledging the biological reality. Marcus became the father I'd always believed he could be. Patient, present, honest. When he struggled with dark thoughts, guilt over not seeing his father's crimes earlier, anger at the life he'd lost, he went to therapy instead of lashing out. I broke you once, he told me on our 2nd wedding anniversary. I won't break you again. We broke together, I said, and we healed together. That's what matters. We had another child, a son, conceived through IVF, using Marcus's verified genetic material at a clinic we'd vetted obsessively. We named him Justice. Destiny and justice, Simone laughed. You two don't do subtle, do you? Not anymore, I said. We spent too long living in lies. Now we live loud and true. Richard is still in prison. He'll die there. I don't visit him. None of us do. But I did write him one letter, which I never sent. I needed to write it for myself, to say the things I'd held inside. Dear Richard, you tried to play God. You thought you were improving humanity by forcing your genes into women who never wanted you. You believed your DNA was superior, that you had the right to decide who should exist and how. You were wrong. Your children, the ones you created through deception and violence, are not your legacy. They're ours. We raised them. We loved them. We taught them that character matters more than genetics, that choice matters more than blood. You gave them DNA, but we gave them everything else. Values, morals, love, the ability to choose who they become instead of being defined by who made them. My daughter will never know you. She'll know that a bad man hurt her mother, but that her mother fought back. She'll know that her father chose her, defended her, loved her fiercely. She'll know that family is built, not born. You're rotting in a cell, and I'm free. I have a husband who cherishes me, children who adore me, a career that fulfills me, a community that supports me. I won. Not because you're in prison, though that helps, but because I took the worst thing that ever happened to me and turned it into something beautiful. I found strength I didn't know I had. I built a family from broken pieces. I helped other women escape the silence you forced on them. You wanted to create a dynasty. Instead, you created an army of survivors who will make sure no one else suffers like we did. That's your real legacy. Not perfect children with your DNA, but scarred women and men who refuse to let monsters win. I hope you think about that every day. in prison. I hope you realize that all your planning, all your crimes, all your arrogance, it led to your complete and total destruction. And I hope you understand that I don't hate you. Hate would mean you still have power over me. Instead, I pity you. You could have been a healer, a helper, someone who brought life into the world with honor, but you chose to be a monster, and monsters always fall. Thank you for showing me what I'm capable of. Thank you for pushing me so far that I had no choice but to push back. Thank you for being so evil that fighting you became simple. I'm not grateful for what you did, but I'm grateful for who I became while stopping you. You took something from me that night I can't remember, but I took everything from you. Your freedom, your reputation, your power, your legacy. I win, you lose, and that's all there is to say. Nadia Richardson. I burned that letter in our fireplace, watching the words curl into ash. Marcus stood beside me, his arm around my shoulders. Feel better? He asked. Yeah, I said. I really do. We stood there watching the flames, Destiny asleep on the couch behind us, Justice in his bassinet, the whole house quiet and safe and ours. This was our life now, not the one we'd planned, not the one we'd dreamed about when we were young and naive, but ours, built from truth and pain and choice and love, and it was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story gave you the justice you needed to see, check out the other videos on screen. They're just as satisfying. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? See you in the next story.